Many cottages, also known as camps in northern Ontario, are situated on land leased from First Nations, often long ago. As those leases come up for renewal, it's raising some challenging questions. Our Ontario Hub's copy editor, Adam McDowell, has been looking into that, and he joins us now. Welcome, Adam.
Hiya.
So, can you tell us how important cottaging is for the Ontario identity?
Sure. Having a summer home in the country is not, of course, unique to Ontario, but there's a special place for it here. For one thing, there's the scope. I mean, there's 250,000, roughly, recreational lakeside properties in this province, which is a big number. And there are entire districts and counties whose economy revolves around it. And then on another level, we've mythologized the Ontario cottage to a great degree in this country. I mean, the idea, think about the image of Muskoka chairs on the dock and the rugged landscape and socializing with close friends. I mean, that's very much an Ontario-created idea that I'm not sure has any parallel anywhere else.
Now, as Ontarians become increasingly aware of Indigenous issues, can you tell us how that's affecting the cottage experience?
Sure. Well, for one thing, of course, Indigenous people were always part of cottage country. They were there first, for one thing, and they've always been around. I mean, for one thing, cottaging creates a lot of employment in cottage country. But as academics have observed, a lot of white cottagers, a lot of white upper middle class, typical cottage owners, sort of pushed the Indigenous people out of sight, out of mind. It wasn't really part of the experience for them. As reconciliation unfolds, that's become impossible to do. You can't not think about who had the land first and who else has a stake in it. And for Indigenous people, what they're doing is thinking about their role as landlords in cottage country. Most cottages are on Crown land that's long since privatized, but a small minority, give or take a few thousand, 3,000 cottages, are on land leased from First Nations. There's 22 First Nations across the province that lease their property to cottagers.
You got a chance to talk to some people. Give us a few examples of how this is exactly playing out.
Well, the big one that comes to mind, first of all, is what happened at Hope Bay, where the Chippewas of Nawash First Nation started evicting cottagers back in 1995. So this was one of the sort of early examples of this. And this played out over obviously a very long time. Some of the last, without getting into all the ins and outs, some of the last lawsuits that came out of this wrapped up last year, as far as I know. So that's 22 years. And it's not just leasing that's an issue. It's also the whole idea of treaty rights. There's one gentleman who sort of famously at Pigeon Lake, north of Peterborough, started planting wild rice, as asserting his right to do so in a waterway used by cottagers. And so they were upset at the way this was, say, blocking their boats and so on. And somebody even made a play about this. So this is, this has become an issue. Yeah.
Obviously, very complicated problem. What are any solutions in sight at all?
Well, the interesting thing is there will be problems, inevitably. There will be little flare-ups and disagreements and so on. But speaking with a couple of cottagers associations, what I'm getting is that even though there's been media attention on a few issues in particular places, for the most part, the relationship between Indigenous people and cottagers in Ontario has been really cordial and has been, again, there are difficulties here and there, but for the most part, people are being careful about the way this is happening. One of the heads of the association said to me, this is reconciliation. This is how it's going to be. We're just going to have to take this all very carefully and try to understand each other. And one of the interesting things is, the head of another cottagers association said to me, the real problem is the federal government. So there are going to be instances of working out treaty rights and so on where the cottagers and Indigenous people are going to be on one side of the issue, and a government, whether federal or provincial, will be on the other.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that insight.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.